We will finish with an interesting presentation on integrating ESG into sustainability reporting, ESG materiality assessment and strategy development. We are pleased to have a panel of experts to lead the presentation. Please welcome back Aleksandra Njagulj, co-founder of Sustineri Partners and ESG expert. Then, Branko Kecman, CEO of Advantis Broker President at Business Club. Adeliada Mehmetaj, co-founder and head of research, ConsciESG. And Nancy Mancilla, founder of ISIS Group.
So what we want to talk to you about today, after all these theoretical talk, after all, policy makers, after all of the board members and so on that said, this needs to be done, let's try and bring it down a little bit and talk about practical matters, how it actually looks like in practice. You will not necessarily come out of this session ESG experts, but hopefully it will be useful to materialize a little bit what it is that we're actually talking about. So the first step is, of course, strategizing. And we went through this, and I will speed up as well so we can all get to those cocktails. You have heard about what ESG is. You have heard how many various indicators there are, how complex it is, how many things we need to talk about and think about. So setting up an ESG strategy is a complex matter because you have to bear in mind all of this, but also bear in mind what is important for the company. So all the regulations that we're talking about, all the stakeholders that we need to bear in mind. So think about your lenders, your investors, your consumers. All of them will have an opinion, and all of them may pick one of these issues and think they're more important than the others. So you cannot hit 100% on every single point you see here. You need to think about what is material for your company, what you need to focus on. The drivers that we again talked about this already today. The drivers can be seen as negative drivers and positive drivers. Negative, and it's two sides of the same coin. I keep having discussions with our legal department back in Germany. They keep saying, well, you have ESG factors, and they can negative. You can, from your investment, you can negatively impact environment and social cohesion, right? So that's negative. And from the other side, well, all of these things can negatively impact your business plan and financial performance of your investments. And I keep telling you, it's the same thing. It is negative if you're not performing very well, but it is positive if you are, because that is the opportunity, right? So think about it in that way. You can see the same drivers, the same criteria that we'll be looking at as both a risk and an opportunity. And depending how you approach it and how you integrate it in your business, it can be either or. So we talked about, let's not talk about only negative things, let's talk about opportunities. So opportunities on the right-hand side, and we are seeing it already. If you want to have investors in your fund, if you want to have investors in your company, the gatekeeper that I was talking about earlier today is this minimum performance. But then you want to be also attractive and beat the competition to this capital. And it is growing, right? So if you take a look at the reporting requirements, that's the negative thing. And of course, data is important. And of course, it's more and more reporting. And of course, it's a burden that needs to happen. But on the right-hand side, you can see the amount of capital that is going in one way or another into ESG investing or sustainable investing. And that's where we want to get to. So the strategy is very important. And you will find your company and yourselves on various points on this curve. What I want to talk about, let me see if my little marker works. It doesn't. If you look at the first one there, this is what happens. You start with something. Anything that you do before you even think about sustainability is going to have some positive impact, right? You're going to have that first rush of enthusiasm, like, starting on a diet, and, first couple of kilos go down very quickly, and then you need something more in order to keep going on your route, or if you want to get to run in a marathon or something like that. That first rush and that first enthusiasm passes very quickly. And if you want to go to the next stage and actually perform well, that's where you need a strategy. And that's why it's so important to be well embedded and well thought out and part of the business, as Biljana said earlier, hardwired into the business, because you want to go on and actually be that sustainable business that everybody wants to invest in, be that sustainable business that gets better credit rates, be that sustainable business whose products everybody wants to buy. Okay, so the process. Well, we first have to think about the context. We have to think about all the regulations that we were talking about earlier today, all the positive and negative drivers that I have mentioned. How is the company performing? Do we have any information right now? Do we know who our peers are? How are they performing? What can we learn from those that have gone this way before us? Is there something to pull from them? And very, very importantly, and this is why I have that first slide with a gazillion various indicators, you need to find out what is material for your company. So what is important for an IT company, and what is important for an agriculture manufacturer, or what is important for a metal works producer or for a mining company, they're all going to have different priorities. So we need to think about where this company has an important impact. So trying, let's take, for example, we have a real estate investment and we are going to, in a city, invest in an existing building and refurbish it. Your impact is not contribution to biodiversity. You can put a green roof, but it's minor. You can say, well, we're going to put a little garden where people can put and grow vegetables. You're not resolving world hunger. So you need to think about the wider picture and then where your company has important impact, where it is material, and then focus on that. So focus is incredibly important. You cannot do everything in every one of those topics that I said. You cannot do, especially not well. So think about what is important for your company. And those are the material issues that I have there. And then from that, you set objectives. You focus on those issues, you set your objectives, and you go forth, right? And my fellow presenters will go through the next stages. I just want to leave you with one slide that shows examples, right? I said, look at your peers, look at what they have done. And this is set of examples. And many of these are our attendees on this summit. They have done exactly that. They have looked at, maybe in the top right, you can see OTP Bank. This is the Sustainable Development Goals. They have identified those that are important for banking industry, and then they're focusing on those. You can take a look at Coca-Cola. We had a panel with representative just now. So top in the middle. Again, you have many various topics that are important, but the top right is where they're really mostly focusing. Of course, everything else is happening as well, but those are the two most important ones. So you focus on that first and foremost, right? So I will leave you then with Branko to talk about more practical examples.
When we talk about implementation of ESG strategy, it depends on the structure of the company, governance structure. If their company has a board, then board should or have to be focused on implementation of ESG strategy, establishing ESG committee, or minimum one board member should be fully dedicated in ESG implementation. It is important to understand that everything should start from the top. I always talking about CEO of the NLB group, Blaž Brodnjak, who always said that he is giving his personal example how he is living ESG. He said that he do not put on his air conditioning in his car, that he not drive more than 130 kilometers per hour on the highway, and that he is giving that personal example to fight for better climate on his place. And as a result, NLB Bank is the first financial institution in whole region that have ESG. On the other side, if there is company that do not have proper board in function, if we talk about SMEs, Then the main focus is on C-level. And C-level has tough business to do because it should be ESG team implemented, and that team should have strategic oversight and operational responsibilities. It is tough to, that same people have strategic and operational responsibilities. But main focus is, if we implement ESG, it should be part of DNA of the company. And each member of the team should live that together. Structure the ESG team depends on the sector in which company operates. If we take example of the big FMCG companies like Coca-Cola is, it is normal that they have, for example, diversity, equity, inclusion officer. In smaller companies, probably they do not need that. On the operational level, it is important to have a chief sustainable officer and the ESG team together. They need to work on that. On the other side, they need to report to board, and it needs to be an open discussion in the company, and probably implementing ESG strategy will provide possible new business models for companies and new markets, and that will probably push for some organizational changes in the company. And the whole team needs to understand that a company will be changed, but profitability will be better. I will take again example of NLB Bank. NLB Bank price of shares has the biggest book to value, 0.6 book value on the stock exchange. If we compare with other local banks, it is 0.3. Investors, that means that investors would like to pay higher prices for shares of NLB Bank than other local bank or other regional banks. And really, ESG, what everybody talked today, will bring new profitability to shareholders. It is not social action or Red Cross activity. It is stakeholder capitalism. To have implementation of ESG, companies should prepare tailor-made educational programs for each member of the team. Because it is important that each part of the company understand and each member team live ESG and understand their position in the company. That will bring a totally new company on the same market and probably open new opportunities. Implementation process should include roles and responsibilities for each member, time frame, KPIs to implementation of strategy, and the most important, KPIs for positive impacts on the company, and budget that will company dedicate to ESG implementation. Experiences around Europe said that one company needs probably 3 years to implement ESG in DNA of the company. And ESG assessment is normal process, but probably ESG update of the ESG strategy, everybody should count on that. At beginning, for example, NLB Bank take exclusion list all sectors that are connected with coal. Probably in coming future, NLB Bank will change that and will invest in coal sector to transfer to greener energy. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, where I'm coming from, we have a lot of thermal plant production of electricity, and around 2 billion euros needs to be invested to change thermal plant energy to renewable energy. Somebody needs to invest that money, that we have cleaner atmosphere. If all financial institution put on exclusion list coal sector, then in that case we will not be able to transfer energy to greener. And probably companies like NLB Bank will change that in their strategy, and it is normal process. Related to reporting, companies should decide which reporting framework to adopt, whether they will use GRI or SASB or TCFD or some other frameworks. And it is important in reporting process to include as much as possible different stakeholders that they understand your reports. Champions in the region, from my personal view, are Delta Holding and Atlantic Group. They have different approaches in their reporting process. Delta Holding have report on all holding, and Atlantic Group has different reports for different divisions. When we talk with clients about regional examples, Argeta is the best, for my personal view, best example how they change their business models using ESG. They change packaging of Argeta, that it could be fully recycled, and then they open TikTok channel to show production of the paste and give opportunity to customers to come to production lines to see how production of the paste is going on, and that they can see that Argeta paste is really quality paste, and that parents could give that to their children to eat. And in that case, currently Argeta is on the #1 place on market of paste in Europe, and they are aggressively attacking the American market. And I hope so that we will have more regional examples living ESG and put ESG in DNA of the company. Thank you.
So I'm next, and I'm going to try and deliver a crash course in ESG disclosure in 10 minutes. And the reason I'm invited to do that is because my company is the license holder for these global standards, and we've done it for thousands of people, especially the new CSR officers. So when you get started with this process, you're probably going to be super committed and super excited to get going, and also scared because you don't have renewable energy generation on site, and you don't have total recycled content for your products. But you're going to start in looking at these different standards and trying to determine which frameworks to use and how to develop your own framework. And that will be scary, because you're going to feel alone and you're going to feel like you're lost in a labyrinth. So what we generally recommend is that you, whoops, there's a little bit of a tech glitch, but I hope you can get the point. What I suggest people doing is taking the time to draw alignment between the global standards. Now, they try to do it on their own, but with maybe 1 or 2 different standards, but they also tend to have some tension. And so you don't have the mapping available fully to yourselves, so you want to first prioritize what's relevant and look at those metrics alongside one another just to see how far you can go in terms of depth and breadth of disclosure. So since there are some measures that are very consistent across the board in terms of what companies are reporting on, whether they're privately held, publicly traded, that's usually something related to social impact, so giving, charitable giving, volunteerism, labor, recruitment, hiring, turnover, and of course, your energy and emissions. You can't disclose emissions unless you track your energy detail, so that's the consumption levels. Once you're able to do that, you can convert the detail into greenhouse gas emissions. And I apologize if this all seems a little bit wonky as well, but Scope 1 greenhouse gas emissions are those that are produced on site, Okay, sometimes that happens through a chemical reaction. That can also happen through on-site generation. And there are several other kind of scriptors that we follow to determine what are those Scope 1 emissions. Scope 2 is energy purchased. So anything that you purchase from a utility provider, that seems simple enough, right? Everyone can pull that information. And when you start to pull it, again, you're going to sense some fear, because you're going to see that you don't know where that detail is. Who holds that information? Is it the accounting team? Are they teams on site? Does your utility provider provide the information as clearly as you need? You might have the costs, but you might not have the consumption, and you also need those consumption levels. Okay, so then Scope 3 is something that we've heard already, upstream, downstream, and that's extremely challenging, but something that you want to get ahead of. Another recommendation I would make is, as you're going through this process, to think about your risks. Okay, we've heard that come up several times, and again, another global standard or framework is available, and that's TCFD, which is super helpful, and also CDP, which I like to refer to kind of like Prince, you know, the musical artist, the artist formerly known as Prince. Well, it's an organization that was formerly known as the Carbon Disclosure Project. And whether or not you plan to report through that vehicle, the guidance is extremely useful because they provide step-by-step, almost like options for how you're to disclose and how you're supposed to manage this information. And so using them all in line is really helpful. You identify your risks, you discuss your strategy for overcoming those risks, and then you disclose. The disclosure doesn't need to be so comprehensive at first. The value is disclosing where you're at. So whether or not you have maybe detail for your properties in the Balkans versus properties in other countries, you want to start where you are and fully explain why you have that information for that subset, what's missing, and what you intend to do moving forward. Luckily for you all, there are a lot of examples out there in the world from companies that are really advanced in their journey. You know, we have Coca-Cola that we've heard from. One of those that I like to refer to is Ball Corporation. It's a US-based company. Of course, I'm looking at those because that's where I'm based. But Ball Corporation does a great job of separating out the story from the data. And why is that necessary? Because consumers, they get excited about the story. Future employees get excited about the story, but investors, they want to see that detail line by line. So another recommendation would be to set up these indices, or they're called, like GRI has their content index, SASB has their index, and then CDP is the response that you can choose to keep private or make public. So it's dry information, right? It's not that sexy, but it's extremely important information towards making decisions internally, but also meeting those investor requests. So use those indexes, put the information in. You can embed those tables, and you can also draw alignment to other standards or initiatives like the Sustainable Development Goals. And you can have them as separate downloads on your website. So you want to, again, separate story from the detail, and then you'll find that extremely helpful in the organization. Some other kind of key recommendations as you get started. So, and this is, again, particularly for these metrics on energy usage. Document the monthly usage. You might not have a data management system in place just yet, so build out an Excel worksheet. I know we get a lot of pushback from using Excel. Everyone says, oh, that's archaic, but that really helps you build your practice and your knowledge. And you can also see where you have gaps. And that, again, that's extremely important. From there, you want to consolidate your data. So you go month to month, and you build it out into an annual basis. And then from there, you can start to see trends. That's where the ESG governance comes in handy. Because when you start to see trends and you have your complete data sets, you can bring together the different executives to look at the detail and determine what's needed. Where do we need to take corrective action? What more can we do to reduce our impacts and maybe accelerate change or create opportunities? And then you can start to budget for them. So you see, just try to, I know we heard in a previous panel about simplicity, but I also always suggest trying to keep things simple and not overwhelm what you can do. Once you have all your detail in place, you can convert to greenhouse gas emissions, and then a critical component is what I suggest is number 4, and that's building out a greenhouse gas inventory management plan. That's in our practice. We have also an assurance side of our work, and I would say 9 times out of 10 when companies come to us and want their data validated, they don't have a greenhouse gas management plan in place, and we can't very easily recalculate the data and see how they're managing it within a certain level of quality. I know that's a lot of information at once, but there is a really nice template online, freely accessible through the US EPA, and all you have to do is Google US EPA Greenhouse Gas Inventory Management Plan, and you can recreate that for yourselves. And in that, you can document, so it is more qualitative in nature. Again, it complements the quantitative, but you can document where you get this information, who is responsible for that in the organization, how you handle your calculation methodologies, how you handle omissions or exclusions, and then how this information is reviewed, and then eventually how that rolls up to the board, how you explain what's being done in one document. Okay, so that's probably my best recommendation to you all as you get started. And also, again, try not to beat yourselves up if you can't innovate right away. It takes time. Like we heard, maybe 3 years down the road, then you can fully start to see the program come together. In my practice, I see 12 years plus when we start to see innovation. And it's groups like this, Ball Corporation, that also is able to take a further step and integrate their practice into financial planning. So it's no longer just a standalone in the sustainability group, but it's integrated. We start to see critical impacts, and we can, again, account for that in our regulated financial filings and create innovative opportunities. So again, I feel like I'm a voice from the past and a voice to the future for you all, because we've seen that growth from the start in the United States when we had only 8% of the S&P 500 producing this type of disclosure, and that was 18 years ago. Today, it's 96%. So it can be done. It takes time, but you have all the models in the world, and you have all the buy-in from your regulators, from your governments, from your experts. So may the forces be with you. That's my final statement to you. And I think we have our next and final speaker today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Nancy spoke about reporting, and she mentioned that that's the not so sexy part of ESG. I will tell you about the sexy part of ESG, which has to do about taking all the data and packaging it nicely into scoring and benchmarking in order to help us draw insights in a meaningful way. So before I get to the whole innovation part of where I come from, which is the company ConsciESG that I've co-founded, I would like to draw your attention back to materiality and tell you a little bit why materiality again should show up even from an assessment perspective. You don't hear it often, but it should. And the reason why you don't hear it is because the focus for the last, 20 years has been primarily on ESG risk. But ESG risk, and I hate breaking it to you right now, is a little bit outdated. Why is it? Well, because if you think of where it comes from, ESG risk is a measurement system that tries to assess how well a company is managing controversies that come from environment and society that can affect their bottom line. So from that perspective, just single materiality, which you see in the top picture here, or in other words, financial materiality, has been more than enough to really be used to assess ESG risk. However, if you look at all the new stricter regulatory directions and all the stakeholders' demands recently, They're moving away from risk and they're headed towards impact. And when we talk about, especially initially, about combining ESG and impact, it sounded quite controversial. Well, because impact was that way of us shaming companies. You're doing well and you're doing bad, and, shame on you and good job. And risk, or ESG, was more associated with risk and how well a company is doing at protecting its bottom line. So at ConsciESG, we thought, well, let's bring them both together. And to do so, we started from the concept of double materiality, which really was pioneered by the GRI, which was also mentioned before, and has to do with taking into account both channels. The one that comes from financial materiality, or the outside-in channel, and also the one that comes from the inside-out channel, which has to do with the impact materiality. So once you do that, then you can tell a completely different story, which is quite niche, but it is different because it is helping companies just get out of that shameful story of whether you are in a green industry, you get that green pass, and if you are in a brown industry, you get shamed for life. Well, no, if we tell a progress story, then every company can compete differently and fairly, because every company, given the right investments, can actually demonstrate the right progress towards decarbonization, net zero, gender equality. We often forget to mention also the social themes that matter so much. So we built our ESG Novas course at ConsciESG really to tell this progress story, which is so important, right? It's so important because it's the only way, only if we're capable of turning that story into numbers and metrics and statistics, is the only way how we will be able to align companies' operations with progress and investments with progress. So now let me get your attention back to the value that this type of approach can bring to our clients, which are really companies and investors. So let me start with with companies. We're working on this actually quite actively. One of the key benefits of good ESG performance right now is to help companies to lower their cost of acquiring new investments. Okay? The second thing, how ESG can help a company, and that's actually quite relevant for the region where we're at, is through increasing productivity. And why do I say it's relevant? Because ESG can help Western Balkan companies to retain their talent, an issue that is actually quite prevalent in our region with the brain drain problem and whatnot. The third way how we think that ESG and how it has been proven that good ESG performance can help companies is through acquiring new markets. And not only new and broader markets, but also through entering in new customer groups, making your product appealing to new customer groups, for example, Gen Z. And last but not least, I want to spend a little time here drawing your attention to the financial performance that good ESG performance is correlated with. And this graph that I've shown here, it's actually not ours, it's borrowed from a recent study of Deutsche Bank, where they looked at over 2,000 studies. It's a mega study, 2,000 studies that analyzed the correlation between corporate financial performance and ESG performance across all the different geographical regions. And I want again to draw your attention to the one that's most appealing to us today, which has to do with the emerging markets, where we're currently at. What do you notice? It has the highest positive correlation, even compared to markets such as, for example, North America. So that's something of really high value to think about. And when we think of ESG assessment and ESG scores, we think of how to maximize the benefit of its use. And to maximize the benefit of its use, we decided to utilize the market that has the largest potential at doing so, institutional investors. And there are currently over $33 trillion in ESG assets globally, and that number is set to surpass 160 trillion by 2036. That's really a close date. So how can the progress story really help these agents of change induce the change that we need globally? Well, because if we tell a progress story, then we're giving institutional investors what they're missing. We're giving them those companies that truly carry the largest potential towards reaching our global transition targets. A progress story combined with a double materiality, which takes into account not risk but also impact, helps investors to have transparent scores and to have the right due diligence done against greenwashing. Okay, and with that I'll end. I guess you're all tired today and you can't wait for the happy hour to begin soon. I can't either.